welcome to the Glasswerk podcast. Today we interview Incubus frontman Brandon Boyd about his new solo record. Okay, firstly, I just wanted to ask you about your new record. People are going to make the obvious sort of comparisons between this and Incubus, and I just wanted to know, for you, like, what is the difference for you? What is this a product of?
I think that there's the obvious similarities because especially when any singer goes off and does a different project, especially one that's like myself, that's been involved with sort of exclusively one project for such a long time, and being that I'm the singer and the lyricist, so I'm sort of like the voice, if you will. For Incubus, I understood that there would be kind of an immediate how does this compare to Incubus?
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably for a short period of time that almost acted like a deterrent from doing anything, because also, truth be told, there was very little, if anything, that I wasn't able to do in Incubus as an artist and as a singer. So
Mm-hmm.
the decision to do this was born more of a collective decision as a band in Incubus to kind of take a break and a hiatus, if you will, and not actively kind of go out and be on tour for a minute and just sort of step away from it. And we kind of gave ourselves and each other permission to stretch out and do whatever the fuck we wanted, basically. So, but that didn't necessarily mean any of us wanted to stop making music, and what's interesting is that everybody immediately kind of went off, and maybe in some, I don't know, search for a sort of an individual identity. We've always had a sort of collective identity as a band,
Mm-hmm.
and since we were kids, so I think that it makes perfect sense that at some point we were going to want to see what we would sound like left to our own devices. So that was part of it. And then part of it too was a lingering curiosity in me to try and write songs with Brendan O'Brien. He'd only ever produced Incubus records. So I'd worked with him for 10 years, but I'd never written a song with him. So getting to your question, I think that probably the main difference is my writing partner, and that creates almost like a setting,
Mm-hmm.
a sort of an aesthetic geography, if you will. And so the stuff that we were writing together immediately started coming out very, very different than Incubus, because Brendan is a very different kind of musician
Mm-hmm.
than I've ever worked with before. And it was writing with him was bringing out things in me that I'd never really indulged. There was these sort of fun, strange kind of pop sensibilities that were starting to come out of me, and I've never been afraid of such things. So
Mm-hmm.
they never really came forth in Incubus as strongly as they did with this project. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to pop back quickly to something you said. I know you said that there was always a freedom within Incubus to do whatever you wanted, but is there a
Yeah.
sort of different sense of freedom in working on your own and not having that label on a project?
Yeah. There were a number of things in a sort of logistical sense. There was no longer a record label.
Mm-hmm.
There was no longer even management involved. This project was very kind of like freewheeling out
Mm-hmm.
into the wilds. There was no time constraint. There was no real budget constraint of any kind. It was all just sort of born of a mutual interest between Brendan and I to make music together. So in a lot of ways, it was just like back to basics, back to the most sort of elemental reasons why people would want to make music, just out of a pure joy and perhaps mutual appreciation for what each person is able to do. And as well, the difference between one of the big differences was I was bouncing ideas off of one other person
Hmm.
as opposed to four other people. So in Incubus, it's like we all kind of do our respective parts. Um, Michael writes the guitar parts, and I write the lyrics and the melodies, and Jose plays the drums, and so it's a committee. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? For better or worse. And I think a lot of the time that's acted as a strong point for us as a sort of songwriting collective. But writing with Brendan, it was just him and I. There was nobody else to sort of there were no other opinions sort of coming
Yeah.
into the kitchen. So it was a much more closed kitchen, I guess you could say.
I've heard you talk about that before because I was looking at some of the other interviews you'd done and talking about that sort of having that one person to bounce off as opposed to a number of people to bounce off. And I
Yeah.
just how do you think you would fare on your own? I mean, like, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but like, how do you think you would fare if it was just you in a room and you were set off to make an album?
Right. Well, there's actually a really good example of that exists already. In 2010, I wandered off into the woods of upstate New York and made a record called The Wild Trapeze.
Hmm.
And that was actually my first solo record, but I didn't really do anything to promote it or uh, at all. I mean, I did a tiny bit of press right when it came out, but then I went straight into writing If Not Now When with Incubus.
Hmm.
So I never performed the songs and nothing like that. So the Wild Trapeze is a good example of what I sound like when left completely to my own devices. I played, 98% of the instruments on that record, and um, it
Did
was a lot of fun, but it was humbling too, because I'll be the first one to admit that I'm not a fantastic musician. I'm under no illusions that I am a good guitar player or a good drummer. I know how to play the drums, I know how to play the guitar, and I can tinker on many instruments, but I don't excel in any one instrument other than I'm pretty good at singing at this point. I think I'm doing all right with that.
Yeah, man. In terms of playing shows, because you said you didn't perform that so much, the solo shows, I'm assuming. So correct me if I'm wrong. That the shows are going to be would be smaller than that of Incubus. And I just wanted to know
Yeah.
how you approach those shows. Do you approach them differently? Is there a notable difference in the performance element of it?
Yeah, well, I just did the first handful of concerts um, that were Sons of the Sea concerts. We did perform a lot of material off of the Wild Trapeze as well. Um,
Hmm.
but it was interesting because it was the first time that I ever actually actively put a band together. Incubus has been the one and only band I've ever been in, and I can't really say that I put the band together. It was almost like we kind of just sort of like we just became a band. I know that Mike, I grew up with Michael and Jose from Incubus since we
Hmm.
were kids. And Michael was always very talented at the guitar, and Jose started playing drums when we were in, I think late middle school or early high school. And I think that they were interested in me as a singer because I had long hair and I wasn't, I liked holding the microphone. I didn't know how to sing or anything, but I just sort of had long hair and liked holding the microphone. These are reasons you start a band when you're 14 or 15 years old.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, and that's really it. And we sucked. We were awful, but we just kept at it, and eventually we started getting pretty good after a decade or so. So, um, but yeah, so I went out and sought out musicians to learn this material and play this material. At first, it was actually really daunting. It was scary to me. Um, and but then I started meeting people who I was really sort of vibing with, and I eventually met some guys and we started getting together and playing, and I started realizing how much sort of luck is involved in putting a band together. And so the shows were fantastic. There's only 8 of them so far, but they were so enjoyable, and I really think that I sensed from the audience reaction as well that they were enjoying themselves, so it was nice.
That's
But it's very different. I mean, it's 5-piece band. There was no production. We had like a backdrop. We
mhm.
were um, it was about as stripped back as we would have been in Incubus when we were playing in small theaters. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like but it was fun. It was really fun. It was a beautiful challenge. I
Is it
loved every minute of it.
is it nice to get back to that sort of like bare bones performance? Is it nice to go back to that and sort of have that intimacy with the crowd a bit more?
It was really enjoyable. I hadn't felt that kind of thing in such a long time, and in a lot of ways, um, I, I missed it. But in just as many ways, it made me appreciate where Incubus has sort of gotten to
Hmm.
after so many years and so much work. And so um, I just feel like I'm in a lovely place with it, almost spiritually, because I so look forward to doing more Sons of the Sea shows, even if it continued at that level. But I also am
Hmm.
so excited about going back out with Incubus and being able to play like arenas and things like that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost like I'm my cake and eating it too.
That's good, man. That's good. You
Yeah.
use your creative arts quite often as sort of like a political platform, and I kind of wanted to know why that was or where that comes from.
Hmm. I wouldn't necessarily say that I use them as a political platform. I politics are in my opinion, a fool's errand. For me at least, for me to get involved in certain things politically, has really just taught me that's a sort of fast track to massive disappointment. So I've always felt like when someone wants to get something done in a socially conscious way or create any kind of a social action, art and music are more like a fast track. They're like a super pill
Hmm.
to social change. So I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to um, share art and music as a medium for social awareness and social change. That would be in my deepest intention. I don't expect for those things to happen, but
Hmm.
if they do, if something I paint or draw or share with people brings them into a place of a heightened awareness, then that's an amazing thing. So I've done certain collaborative art projects with, for instance, Hurley, the surf company, and we did it to just sort of help raise awareness about single-use plastics and ocean pollution. And once again, these are things that, like, if you were trying to make these moves in a political way, um, it would be infuriatingly slow.
Hmm.
You'd basically like trying to turn the Titanic around. It eventually stuff happens, but maybe I just don't have that kind of patience. So I like to create imagery and create sounds and stuff that perhaps evokes a reaction out of somebody that makes them maybe think differently about something that they thought they knew.
Hmm. Do you start with an end goal in mind, or is it something that just sort of you can attach the meaning to it as you go along, and you can go, well, that kind of applies to this.
Hmm. That's a good question. Usually I have no idea what I'm making while I'm making it, and I just sort of do it because it's enjoyable, and there's sort of a meditation in the process that I've found to be sometimes cathartic and sometimes um, just wonderful, just fun to be involved in drawing and or like writing and stuff like that. I think a lot of artists can attest to that. That most of the enjoyment is sort of while you're doing it,
Hmm.
and there's almost a bittersweet um, element that occurs when you're finished with something. And sometimes you'll even prolong the ending of a project because you're having so much fun doing the project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Something like the Hurley thing, I had the idea beforehand, um, and I knew that it was really important to me. I grew up surfing, and I still surf, and surfers and people who are near oceans and stuff are sort of on the front lines uh, of ocean pollution. And we kind of see, you just take a walk down the beach after a storm, and you see kind of the stuff that has been discarded and forgotten about. And just because you forget about it when you sort of throw your plastic bottle into the street doesn't mean that it like goes away.
Hmm.
And we find those things and they wash up. And what's alarming is that they sort of wash up Um, Little of it washes up, and we see a lot of it on the shores too, but little of it actually washes onto shores. Most of it gets pulled in ocean currents into what are known as gyres. There are five of these gyres. You may know something about this, but there's one in the Pacific Ocean, like in the very middle of the Pacific Ocean, that is there's so much plastic and plastic debris and trash that is collected into this gyre,
Hmm.
that it is actually about the size of the state of Texas, this trash island.
Hmm.
And it's a little bit like an iceberg, because most of it you can't see on the surface. Most of it is sort of deep down into the water, and it's changing the ecosystem of the ocean. It's changing the the sort of biochemistry of the fish and the things that we end up consuming. So
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, when we're not paying attention to these things and just sort of doing the single use plastic thing, you tear your plastic off your thing and throw it away and it doesn't go to the right place. We're kind of shitting the bed. We're shooting ourselves in the foot, because we end up consuming that in the end through our food.
Hmm.
So it's really it's one of those things that, in my opinion, is important that we start paying attention to more. Anyway, but to answer your question, yes, I most of the time I don't know what I'm doing. Sometimes I'll have an idea and I'll follow through with it like that.
I just wanted to nip back to what you were saying about the end of a project.
Hmm.
I read it in an interview that you did, that you said that the art doesn't really have a finish line so much, in the
Hmm.
fact that, there isn't really there isn't a end product really. You just kind of decide when it's done. And I just wanted
Hmm.
to know how you get to that place where you feel that a project is ready for people to see, or for
Yeah.
public consumption, I suppose.
Yeah. I think that it's mostly just a feeling. There's like a feeling that if it's like a drawing or a painting and you've been hovering over it for a week and just kind of chipping away at it and adding things and taking things away, and then there's sort of a strange moment, almost like a psychic moment, where the thing you've been making communicates to you, stop.
Right, as soon as you said stop there, the actual thing froze, and I
Oh,
it cut out for a little bit. Um,
oh, interesting. I basically just said that they you know you the piece almost communicates to you, as if you had imbued it with so much love and attention and intention that it like comes alive somehow and it speaks. It's like it says stop, you're finished with this portion of it. But what's interesting is that if you're in that sort of circumstantial space to share your art, whether it's music or painting, with an audience, that's what I mean when I say that the piece is never really finished, because you'll let it go into the world in a book or at an art show, or somebody buys it or something,
mhm,
or you give it to a neighbor or something, and then they hang it on their wall, and then it starts to inform their experience. So in a way, it never stops
mhm.
informing, um, or being interpreted. And if the art lasts, especially, it can inform and be interpreted, sort of cross generationally, which is really fascinating. Especially like for example, take a Beatles song.
Mhm.
It's like everybody knows the Beatles. Most people love the Beatles. I've met a couple people who don't like the Beatles, and they're kind of weird. Um, but their music has continued to like inform and inspire and be interpreted, you know, decades later, many, many generations later. And to me, that's a form of art that's like alive. It's alive. It is its own weird kind of communicative life form that continues to speak, to generations. So that's kind of what I mean when I say art it's never really finished.
Cool. Moving on a little bit. I just wanted to ask. You're quite a creative person. You create a lot of things, whether it's art or music. And I'm assuming that you have moments where you create quite a lot of stuff. How much of that material do you actually use, and how much do you kind of put to the side and go, that's I'm gonna leave that one and come back to it, or completely scrap it altogether? Is there a lot of material that you kind of put to the side?
Yeah, I would say that most of the material doesn't see the light of day. It just Most of the material remains in sketchbooks, or in voice recordings on my phone, or there's I mean, there's a tidal wave of stuff that I hope and pray will never see the light of day, because people might actually see the complete hack that I actually am. You know, it's like people see a good example is like, you know, this sort of social media generation, and it's an interesting phenomenon when we are putting ourselves out into the world via these pictures we take of our lives and of ourselves, and the things that we tweet and the things we put on Facebook and all this stuff. But what doesn't get talked about as often is that it's like each person has become a curator of their own content, and so you get this like hyper filtered version of the person's life.
Hmm.
Really, it's only just a shred of that person's existence. So, in a lot of ways, an artist is kind of, you know, is similar, because you're only getting like this highly curated version until they die. That is, once they die, like everybody digs everything up and starts
I was
to,
going
you
to
know.
ask that actually. I was going to ask if you were gonna keep that stuff like locked away in a box and then be like, ah, surprise, this is all the other stuff.
I have quite a few files, both on computers and in filing cabinets and stuff, that is locked and says read only after I die, or look at only after I die. Literally, I have those things. So all the people they'll piss off and offend and stuff won't be able to get mad at me in person.
I read back in school that you wanted to be an animator of some sort. Is that a medium that you still want to explore?
You know, I'm still fascinated with the medium. Some of my, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry.
Okay, great. Some of my most favorite films are animated films, and I'm like a daily cartoon watcher. You know, it's just the kind of thing that always inspired me for some reason. And I was very interested in it when I was in school. I've become more interested in, I guess, what you could call fine arts. I don't even know what that means, but like painting and photography and drawing and things.
Hmm.
Animating is still fascinating to me, but I had a small taste of um, animating stuff. You know, Incubus made a video for our song Drive many, many, many years ago, and
Hmm.
Jose and we drew all of the cells that were animated on that video, and it took fucking forever. It was like just one after the other. I think we drew for over a week. Um, and it turned out cool. I'm happy with the way that it turned out, but like for 3 minutes of content, I mean, it was like I couldn't believe how much time it took. And I know things have changed quite a lot with sort of computer technologies and everything, but
Hmm.
um, to answer your question, yes, I'm still interested in it, but I don't know if there's going to be any kind of like an animated feature by me anytime soon.
What about other mediums? Are there anything else that takes your interest, like film or anything like that you'd maybe delve into?
Yeah, I'm also very interested in film, both from behind the camera, and if anyone will have me maybe one day in front of the camera, I have no idea. I mean, I know I've been just wonderfully inspired by film in so many different ways. It's kind of hard not to be. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you'd have to be without a pulse to have not been inspired by at least a handful of films in your life. So it's a fascinating medium to me. One also that I know is painstakingly slow and arduous, but um, the film's ability to inspire and create conversations and create change is really powerful. So very interested in that. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in theater. I'm interested in becoming a better photographer. I'm interested in becoming a better singer. I just started taking voice lessons about 8 months ago or so,
Hmm.
um, for the first time in my life, and it's been fascinating to be having been singing this long and just now start to learn some proper technique. Um, so it's hopeful. I might become a good singer one of these days.
I,
It'd be really cool, you know, after having sung so long, it'd be really cool to find, you know, different places in my voice.
I think the idea of being a good singer is subjective. I think a lot of people would probably say that you're a pretty good singer as it is.
It's a totally subjective thing, yeah. And you know, and I understand that, but I also know that I have a sort of almost dangerous curiosity about about life and about the human brain, and as well as our heart and the
Hmm.
place where our heart meets our brain. And I know that I have felt um, at certain points over the past couple of years these little pangs of like, wow, you're getting older, and you see the gray hairs coming in, you see the lines starting to form on your face, and you're starting to hear yourself tell the same stories for the fifth time to the same person, and um, it becomes more and more real that our time here is so fleeting. So there's, not in a panicked way, but more in a lovingly fascinated way, I've um, I have this sort of like lust for life. Like I want to keep learning. It makes me
Hmm.
feel young, I guess you could say, like learning about as many things as I can learn about. And I feel very sort of grateful to have the opportunity to learn about all these things. If the circumstances were just a little bit different, I wouldn't have some of the same opportunities. So I'm so grateful for um, the circumstances in my life. I don't take them for granted.
Absolutely. Um, I've just got a couple more questions left. And I put out I put out that I was doing this interview. I was trying to get people to contribute sort of questions for you.
Mhm.
And in doing so, I realized that you have a lot of fans, and I just wanted to know whether you have much correspondence with your fans. Do you? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, yeah. Here and there, I do. I meet people all the time um, who are longtime listeners and sometimes new listeners, and when I meet them in person, it's wonderful because it's nice to help ground that experience for them,
Hmm.
and it grounds it for me too when I can meet somebody who, so I've met people who were like, I've been listening to you since I was 9, and I'm 27, and it's like that puts it into such a strange perspective, that all you can do is be sort of humbled by it.
Yeah.
Um, Social media on the plus side has really changed that as well. People no longer have to sort of write a letter and lick a stamp and put it in the mail and hope that it gets to you. It's like they just sort of tweet at you.
Hmm.
And so I'm the only one that controls my Twitter feed and my Facebook page and my Instagram stuff. And so I see a lot, actually. I see a lot of what people say. And I have to, if I could just use this moment as sort of the platform to say so, like I'm totally humbled and inspired by the reaction that people sort of mirror to me. They're so gracious and they're so kind, and it's so rare when somebody tells me I need to kill myself on Twitter. It's only happened a couple of times. Most of the time, it's just pure love. And so when I do see the "you should kill yourself" tweet, it's mostly funny.
I was.
People do that. It is, there are such thing as the people who are so, they have so much hurt and anger inside of them that you didn't, do what you wanted them to do. They're like, you need to die.
I was going to ask that. That's sort of my next question. Do you? I mean, not in the negative way at all, but like, do you let your fans have an effect on you and the work that you put out? Do you take into consideration the things that they say to you, and does that have an effect on what you output?
I think that there there's probably an unconscious effect on the output, but um, consciously, I almost think it's my duty to not quote unquote give people what they want. I am not a fan of pandering. I think that it dilutes art and it dilutes sincerity. I'm constantly in search of um, a true a true voice
Hmm.
and true action, and not only in my own work, but in people in their daily lives, and in other people's art and in their work. Um, I think that it is sort of one of a handful of paths to happiness, is to sort of be as true to yourself as you know how to be. And if you don't know how to be, to do everything in your power to learn how to be. So when we get into this sort of pandering thing and the sort of giving people what you think they want, that's to me that's dangerous territory. But to say that the things that I read and hear have zero effect would be a lie, because there is such thing as the unconscious. It's perhaps a governing force in human beings. I know that it's the majority of us. So um, sometimes it's wise to not read too much of what people write to you as an artist, because it can dilute. But when I do read the stuff that I read and get on the social media platform, it's mostly just inspiring. It just makes me feel good about things, because I know that people are hearing what I'm doing, and that's always nice to see, if even in some small way, like the fruits of your work.
Absolutely. My last question. A lot of people wanted to express when I put this up. A lot of people wanted to express how attractive that you were, and I was just wondering whether you get that a lot and whether it's strange being that sort of sex symbol.
I think that's very nice of them. It doesn't make me feel bad, and I definitely appreciate uh, the sentiment. It is a little bit strange sometimes, just because going back into that kind of aging thing,
Mm.
um, we have these sort of fleeting moments of youth in our lives, and then the rest of our life we spend in decay. Like our bodies are literally decaying, and so it's strange because in our culture, and I know it's this way in England too, but definitely in America and probably most sort of first world countries, there's this very, very strange cultural precept that the only time you're worth anything is when you're young and when you're beautiful. And that's really strange. It's really, really odd. It's almost funny, um, because it's such a quick. It's a blink of your life that you're young and beautiful, and then you then you start to sag, and then you start to slow down. And I have to think that there is more beauty in other aspects of life than just sort of the surface aesthetic. All that being said, it's nice to be seen that way, sure, and I thank them for that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Thank
It's
you
been
too,
really great.
man. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too, bud. Thank you very much again. Hopefully I'll speak to you again.
Okay,
All right.
thanks, man.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye.